Yes.
This is my first time.
Yeah, we'll give another minute for folks to navigate to our room.
That was the challenge of the day, was like, how does this work?
Well, we were trying something new, so I'm hoping it's not too complicated for everybody. But we definitely wanted to make the meetings a little more interactive this time.
My 7-year-old does these regularly for remote learning, so I hope that we can all handle it. I don't know.
It's all the usual suspects.
Some of the remote learning stuff, though, Brandy, I'll sit down with my daughter and be like, I don't know.
I know.
It worked pretty easy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to start talking because I feel like our time is all so valuable. I don't want to sit here and wait too long. So I'm Sarah Ryan. I'm the policy director at Housing Alliance Delaware. If we were in a room, I would absolutely never put a PowerPoint up during a breakout session because that's just horrible. However, we are not physically in a room. And although I really would like us all to engage, I do have a PowerPoint to kind of give us some direction just because virtual is so difficult. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the PowerPoint. I'm going to share my screen and bring up the PowerPoint. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I hope to cover. I'm going to bring the PowerPoint down so I can get feedback as to whether or not you think we want to cover everything I've said. I'm happy if someone's like, yeah, I don't really think all of that is relevant, or I really want to make sure we skip to this piece first because I have to leave. That's fine with me. We don't have to follow my PowerPoint chronologically. Then I'm going to kind of move through the PowerPoint. You all have the ability to chat and unmute yourselves. So if there's something that comes up, and I'm going to say this more than once, that you can add to, that you can ask questions about in the moment, absolutely feel free to interrupt me. This does not have to be the Sarah show. But then at the end, I'd love to also have some time to bring the PowerPoint down and see people's faces again and have a little discussion. Erin has told me that we will automatically disappear at the end of the meeting, that we cannot go past 12, which I think is fine. My hope is that we will not go till 12, but we have that ability. But just so you know, we will poof, disappear if we try and push the meeting too long. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now and bring up my PowerPoint. Give me a sec. Make that happen. Okay, so this is my contact information. I will also drop it into the chat. It is also at the end of the PowerPoint presentation. But if anything comes up and you feel like you'd like to follow up with me or share more information or correct me in private, feel free to do that and reach out to me during or after the meeting. So I feel like there's so much to cover right now that I could talk like an auctioneer for the next hour and 20 minutes and probably not cover everything. I feel like we should probably do a quick federal overview, which is more complicated than easy, right? But because a lot of what's happening in the state is being directed by some of the federal money that's coming, I wanted to kind of do a quick overview of what we know about the most recent package, the American Rescue Plan Act, and then kind of give a quick update on what we should be expecting from the federal government in the next couple of months. And then I would like to move on to a state overview. I want to talk about source of income again. I know it was talked about in the general meeting, but I have some, I think we need to get a little bit more into that and kind of what advocacy we should and can be doing around source of income. And then I want to talk about other things that are on the horizon for Delaware. All right, so I am going to stop share for a second so that I can see all of your lovely faces. For those of you who joined after I started talking, I am going to do a PowerPoint presentation, but I want people to jump in and participate. At this moment, is there anything that people feel like should be stricken from our discussion, or that we should make sure that we get to before you leave the meeting? Anything we'd like to rearrange? Any suggestions? All right, again, feel free to use the chat box. You can chat me individually or chat everyone or interrupt me. All right, we're gonna go back to seeing my screen. All right, and I'm gonna say here, I'm gonna say a million times, you're gonna get really annoyed. Please, if you know more about something and I'm saying something that you can contribute to, share. I don't know everything, I promise. All right, so the American Rescue Plan Act is the most recent COVID act that was signed on March 11th. It's the 6th federal legislative relief package, so it gets kind of confusing when we talk about all the buckets of money and how they're being distributed. But it was the $1.9 trillion one that was signed in March. It has a lot of the same programs and addresses a lot of the same issues as different packages that we've seen come down in the last year, but there are some important additions. I will make sure that Erin has the ability to share these slides afterwards. They'll also be posted on our website. But I'm going to speed through a couple of the slides. It's information that's on here, but we don't have to read it together. So what is really important though, right, is when we talk about money, where is it coming from? What is Delaware getting? Some of these pots of money that I'm going to talk about the national allocation of money and kind of like $5 billion for homelessness. But just to drill down on Delaware, we are going to get $1.4 billion of the ARPA money. $1 billion is going to go to the state specifically. That can't be, that's right. 85.6 million is going to go to smaller municipalities in Delaware. So what this means is that there's going to be money that goes to the state, there's going to be money that goes to small municipalities. The kind of calculations of who's getting what has happened already. You can look up online kind of where it is all going to, but it has to do with population and other federal allocations. In fact, for anyone who's interested, there's actually a kind of interesting dispute between Dover and the federal calculation, as they don't think they're getting, and Dover doesn't think they're getting enough based on the way that the calculation happened. So, but the money is essentially going to go to the state, but also kind of spread out over the state and go to different municipalities. This is different than the way some of the other COVID money was distributed. So each individual municipality, it could be expected to get some money, and that's including really small places. So just out of curiosity, I looked up what Frederica is getting in Kent County, and they're getting like 0.4 or 0.04 million or something. So it's like a very small amount, but each little municipality is getting some money, which is exciting. So some major provisions of the bill are that there are these direct stimulus payments to individuals. That does not come out of the pot of money that Delaware is getting. Just to be clear, the money that individuals are getting is not part of this calculation of how much money Delaware is getting. And then, there's the vaccination programs. There's focus on opening schools that all of our wonderful educators are excited about, I'm sure. And then other subsidies are in the bill. One really exciting thing to note is that this is the first time in generations that we have had cash benefit come directly to individuals. So for some period this year, from July to December, individuals will be able to get a monthly cash benefit based only on their number of children. And it's really, really exciting, right? Because this is going to play into housing and other issues that folks are struggling with to get this direct cash benefit. And the qualification is simply income, and then there's no limit for children. So you will get a certain amount of money for each child that you have. And a family of, with 4 or 5 children will get that money for each child, which is also kind of a new and exciting thing.
Hey, Sarah, real quick, there
Yeah.
are 2 questions
see,
in the
yes.
chat. What are the allowable expenditures for municipalities and counties? Do we know that?
So really exciting for all of the geeks in the room. Federal guidance is happening. There's been Treasury guidance already issued on some of this money because states have until actually this weekend to apply for a lot of this money. And so in order to put together a proposal for the money, states have had to have an idea of what they could use it for. For municipalities, it's a little fuzzy. It looks like a lot of this money is going to have kind of less strings attached than it may have had. But the answer to the question that Justin typed in, we're not totally clear on that. I think we're waiting for a lot more Treasury guidance to be clear. The 1 billion that goes to the state is going to go to the state government. So it will go to the state, and the state will then determine how it is distributed. Mimi, I'm not clear exactly on how that is happening. We do know that the state has been holding a lot of meetings and talking to a lot of folks about kind of where the money is going to go. I think the legislature is also concerned about that, but if anybody on the call can chime in and has a better understanding of kind of how the state is going to be allocating the money, feel free to do so.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. Like I said, I don't have all the answers on this. All right.
Early days,
Moving.
early days. It's
For,
still great.
I can chime in a little bit about Kent
Okay.
County.
Yeah, thanks.
For Kent County, I was instructed to speak with the city this is Enyo from Co-Purple. I was instructed to speak with the city manager on it before going to other avenues to try to determine what Kent County was going to do. But I do know Kent County, the commission for the actual county was expecting to get around 35 million. And the city itself of Dover was looking to get around 6 million. I know that the guidance on where they were supposed to take the money is still, like you were saying, is still in talks. But we Co-Purple, we have a meeting with the city manager next Thursday, if you can all keep that in your prayers and thoughts, to try to just push a central homelessness prevention center in Kent County. So and we're partnering, we'll always be partnering with y'all, and then trying to make sure we keep partners with the same team that works with the Hope Center in Wilmington. So we're trying to keep all those, like Network Delaware, the Friendship House, Housing Alliance, all those, everyone would always be connected. And so that's happening, and that's all I really know right now. But I was told the city manager, and you can pretty much just call like City Hall and get a hold of the assistant. And like, if you have other projects, I know like some people want to work on the beaches or parks and stuff like that. So that's just, all those things are on the table. And so the more people we get to focus on housing, I think, it'd be better.
Yeah, I would say that's a really good point. Something I probably should have said. So thank you so much. Yeah, a lot of these local governments are going to get money, and like Judson suggested, there aren't a lot of guidelines, and so that we know of yet. And so making sure that we connect with our local governments and asking them to think about housing and homelessness and a way to use this kind of one-time pot of money to make an impact in that area is so important. So thank you, and thank you for sharing. Please, people, share with me. So we know that there are some really big pots of money in the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, to address homelessness and rental assistance. We have a whole other section, right, that's going over rental assistance for Delaware, but just to be clear, so the ARPA is giving $152 million to rental assistance. This is the current DHAP money. This is in addition to the $200 million from the COVID Relief Act in December. So this is like a $352 million for DHAP. The good thing about the money that's coming from ARPA is that the ARPA money is going to have less restrictions on it, we think, than the $200 million that came in December. Again, the Treasury guidance is still kind of happening, but it might be able to use a little more flexibly, which is, we continue to encourage that, to give as many people access as possible. Let me just, okay, so there's a question in the chat about allocation of CARES money. So what's been really fascinating, and maybe this is a good time to stop and talk about this, is that both because there have been two different administrations administering this money, and because every pot of money has been kind of slightly differently targeted, there is still money trickling down to local municipalities, to even to the state, from previous pots of money that have different funding allocation procedures, that have different guidance, that have different treasury requirements. And so what happened with CARES money is kind of a really complex question. We kind of need a lot of red string and push pins to figure out where everything went. But there is a lot of really good information, public information on the state website about kind of how they've tried to funnel money. But we can't, I don't know that I can answer exactly kind of where every pot of money has gone and whether all of it's been allocated or not. Oh, good. Deborah says there's a webinar for us to watch. Great. All right. So the other really amazing, there are lots of amazing things in the American Rescue Plan Act, but just to kind of note for a second that housing vouchers, first time in many, many years that we have seen more allocation of housing vouchers for individuals who are homeless. This is amazing. We're still actually not clear on this point exactly how many vouchers will be allocated to Delaware, but super exciting. The homelessness assistance, again, the 5 billion is the national number. Delaware, again, is getting just under 2 billion. This money specifically is for individuals who are experiencing homelessness. This is the buy a hotel money. And this is money that, again, is going to be a little more flexible than home funds or other funds, maybe used to fill some gaps. We can talk more about that later. The ARPA also has some homeowner assistance, some housing counseling assistance, some utility assistance in it. We can drill down on all of those things too when I bring all your faces back up. A couple things to look for in the federal overview. The budget, Biden released his kind of budget blueprint, which previews what he would like to see in the budget. Just a 30-second budget process primer is that, the president says, here's what I'd like to see, and Congress says, here's what we want, and then there's kind of some agreement and disagreement. That the president doesn't exactly say what's going to be in the budget, right? This is just what Biden would like to see in the budget, his proposed budget. But his proposed budget gives a 15% increase to HUD, which is really exciting. Again, an allocation that hasn't been increased in a long time, which in all of this information is going to give more vouchers, give more housing assistance, and also provide more homes money, we think. The American Jobs Act, which is the infrastructure bill that everyone has been talking about. I'm not going to go into tons of detail about it, but just to kind of flag for you what a huge policy thing this is. Housing has never, ever, ever been included in an infrastructure bill ever in the history of our country. So the fact that housing made it into this bill is huge. The fact that the federal government is recognizing that housing is infrastructure is huge. This is huge. This is a huge moment. That said, is housing going to make it? We don't know. There's a lot of discussion right now because Republicans support the infrastructure piece of the infrastructure bill, so the traditional roads and bridges piece. There's a question of whether or not the bill should be broken in half and housing would go into the non-infrastructure half. This is concerning because we think the infrastructure half, right, the actual roads and bridges, and again, housing is infrastructure, is really important policy point here. that is likely to pass, but if it's broken in half, that maybe the other half, which housing would fall into, might not pass. Currently, it's still all one thing. The hearing yesterday, there was a lot of folks kind of looking at the committee hearing yesterday. It's unclear from that hearing whether or not it will remain as one bill. The hope is that it will. Again, kind of putting housing into this bill is huge. It provides more affordable housing development money. It provides more homes money. It provides more money to revitalize affordable housing, public housing. It's really exciting. Trying to keep up with your chat too. Yeah, so some of the guidance that is, the question was, is there going to be guidance for funding to support projects that address racial inequity? Yes. Some of this money has been earmarked to make sure that it does that. That said, I think that there's a lot of advocacy to be done around that issue. It is likely that local governments will not be as attentive to addressing racial inequities as we'd like them to be. Okay, another thing, just 30 seconds. There is a Eviction Crisis Act that is going to be introduced. We think it was a bill introduced during last Congress. One of the cool things that it does is that it creates an emergency assistance fund, which would kind of be DHAP money forever, right? So that the DHAP, the eviction prevention money could extend and continue past the current crisis. That's really important. All right, so we're going to move on to Delaware, and then this again is where I'm going to take my screen down. I think we need to have some more robust discussion around Delaware, and we can back up and talk about the federal money too. I just think it's important to have that kind of federal, what's happening on the federal level context for Delaware. So I think everyone on this call probably already knows this, but really exciting that we are all the way in April of our legislative session. We expect to see some really great month. Bills in our session are only passed through June 30th. So June is always a very busy month for policy. We are gonna see a lot of movement, I think, on some really important issues, which is fantastic. A quick update on the virtual session. So for anyone who has not attended legislative meetings or committee meetings or the legislative session this session, it is completely virtual. Any public can attend any meeting. You also can give testimony virtually through Zoom. If you need assistance doing that, let me know. The House has decided to go back in person. They will be doing so kind of like schools have gone back, in a hybrid model where the legislators will sit in their office with a computer and continue to do things virtually to allow the public to access the legislature. So as far as we know, the session will remain virtual through the end of June. All right, source of income. I want to talk about this. I'm going to overview a couple other bills, then I'm going to, I promise, stop talking and take my PowerPoint down. Source of income is saying to landlords that you cannot discriminate against somebody who's poor. You can't discriminate against somebody who receives Section 8. You can't discriminate against somebody who uses government assistance or other rental assistance programs to pay their rent. It does not mean that landlords have to accept that rent, right? It means that they just can't put up a sign saying, if you're poor, don't apply for my housing. This is a really important thing because the landlords have been very, very vocal against Senate Bill 90. They are saying they will have to accept Section 8. They are going into the whole problems with the Section 8 program, and we can talk about kind of how to answer these questions. What we know right now is that the bill passed out of committee on the Senate side. It has not made it to the Senate floor. The bill's sponsor is Senator Lockman. She's great. She's certainly an advocate for housing. I suspect that her hesitancy for sending the bill to the floor is that there's been a lot of opposition. This is a call to action. contact Senator Lockman, contact your legislator that's gonna hear the bill on the Senate floor, so it would be your senator. Tell them that you support this bill. Tell them why, right? You can do that. This is not lobbying. This is just saying this bill is important to us. This bill is important to fair housing. If you have questions, if you need help, please contact me. I will absolutely help you. But I think this is our call to action time. This bill needs to move. It needs to go to the Senate floor. We need to make sure Senator Lockman knows that we are in support and that we believe in this bill. Is everyone frozen? No, okay. Okay, other things that may interest you among many bills that are pending, right, is minimum wage bill. There is another bill that adds religion to the discrimination law. We can talk about that more. There's a bill that allows tenants to deduct more from rent for repairs. There's a lot, rental assistance, actually a couple manufactured homes bills. There are many other bills that are interesting that have already been introduced. We can talk about them certainly, but they're already there. What's more exciting to me is the bills that might be coming. So as Deborah stated in the general meeting, there was a bill to change the panhandling statute. So to make it, instead of criminal, to make it civil penalties. That bill was, thanks to your advocacy, was removed. It was stricken. Here's the thing though, it is our current law, like Deborah stated, is unconstitutional. It's just plain wrong, right? We cannot punish people for asking for money. That's not okay. It's been decided over and over again in court that that is not okay. So one bill that has not yet been introduced, but is on the horizon, is a bill that would strike the entire panhandling statute. So it would say, not civil fine, not criminal fine. This is not okay. We cannot have this statute in place. And it would be a statewide, right? We cannot have this statute in place. This is huge, right? If we could strike the panhandling statute and the code in its entirety, it would signal to local governments that also have panhandling bills that, hey, this doesn't fly, this isn't constitutional, this is a piece of legislation to keep your eyes out for. It is currently being drafted. I don't know when it'll be introduced, but possibly in the next week, because a lot of people are going to be introducing things in the next week. There's a bill that's also being drafted that would hold landlords of residential property responsible to be licensed. This is really important for a couple of reasons, but mostly for landlord accountability. It would also provide a defense to eviction if your landlord was not licensed. Right to counsel would provide counsel to individuals in eviction cases. It's another bill to look for that's likely to come up in the next week or two. This is my information again. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to see what I have in the chat. And then I really want to have a discussion. I want to use the rest of our time, now that I talked at you for 25 minutes, I want to use the rest of our time to kind of have a group discussion. We can pull up the slides again if we want to go back to it, about like what you're seeing, what you're interested in, what we need to do to move forward in Delaware. Yes, thank you, Paulette, for reminding everyone that testimony can be written, it can be verbal. You can also send a letter of support for legislation. That's also really important. And again, legislators respond to phone calls and emails. One note on that, though, is that because session is virtual, I've learned that legislators really get a lot of emails. So if you feel comfortable picking up the phone, that is a really good option, because no one can meet in person. Their email boxes are fuller than normal. I also wanted to talk for a couple minutes. We had a question earlier about housing in general, and that there is not enough affordable housing in Delaware, and kind of what is on the horizon for development of affordable housing. So the $5 billion federally for homeless assistance money specifically says that you can use it to develop not only short-term housing, not only like emergency shelter, but some longer-term housing options. I think some states and municipalities are going to be utilizing that money to create some more kind of permanent supportive housing or temporary to permanent housing options. That's a pot of money that's coming quickly and that might provide some immediate housing solutions. A lot of the other federal money that I talked about also has money for housing development. The increase in the low income tax credit program would provide some more affordable housing development. But a lot of the housing development of affordable housing happens on a local level. It has to do with kind of where the funds are going. Yes, where there's money, yes, but also what local governments are doing to encourage or discourage the development of affordable housing. There are some experts on this call that I'm sure could give 3 presentations on how important that is. But there are a lot of really important advocacy points in our state. We'll pick on Sussex County for a minute. So in Sussex County, right, there's a lot of housing development. There is not a lot of affordable housing development. And so creating relationships with local representatives, creating relationships with the county council, creating relationships with local governments helps to allow for the development of affordable housing. And to lift up Brandy Nauman, who spoke in the general meeting, I'm not sure if she's here. She helped to, oh yeah, she's here. She helped to develop 26 affordable housing units on the east side of Sussex County. Getting that approved and getting that development underway, and I think I talked to her recently, Brandy, if you want to chime in, I think that 7 units have been leased up so far. That's really huge, right? But that was a lot of work with the local government, a lot of work with zoning. So the affordable housing development piece, yes, there's some really exciting money coming, but there's also a lot of room for advocacy on the kind of local front. Does a landlord license require, okay, so the landlord license law I have not seen yet. This proposal is important for a couple different reasons. I think periodic inspections may be part of the initial drafting of the law. I think that's going to be a really big point of opposition for landlords. Just data gathering on kind of who is renting where residential properties are is helpful in itself, right? To when housing inspectors, when someone calls the state or local government and complains about housing conditions, it's very helpful for there to be a licensing requirement. But I don't know, Judson. We'll have to wait and see what the draft bill says. That was part of the discussion before the draft bill to require some sort of inspection. Just to flag for you though, with the source of income, those inspections are kind of like the hidden problem, or not so hidden problem, that most landlords have with accepting kind of voucher assistance. And the voucher program itself is not very cumbersome, right? You fill out an additional addendum to the lease, you get paid monthly by the, if it's DSHA, you get paid monthly through DSHA. Landlords get guaranteed rent. It's not, that piece is not hard for a lot of landlords. Some landlords say it is, but some say it's not. The inspection piece is a really big point of contention for landlords for that Section 8 program. So I would imagine that any inspections that are required would be a big point of contention. Yeah, I agree, Paul. I think the inspections are unlikely to be part of the bill at the end of the day. So Paul said that the local governments would fight inspections as a licensing requirement because they'd have to do them. And I agree. I think inspections would be ideal. I don't see it. Just in my opinion, I don't see it. But we We haven't seen the bill yet, so.
Isn't there like a middle path on inspections,
There is.
which would be to indicate that in jurisdictions that required inspections, landlords couldn't bring eviction actions if they didn't comply or something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think other states require licensing before someone files an eviction. They have to put their license number on the eviction. It can be, the conditions piece can be a defense to eviction. Yeah, I think there's a lot of considerations here. Again, it's just legislation to keep your eyes open for. I think we need to support it. I don't know what it's going to say exactly. Paul?
One of the ways I think that we might be able to get a compromise is to have inspections, timely inspections related to code violations.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, instead of going through annual inspections, that tenants who are complaining that they don't have water heater, conditions, that's probably the more favorable route if we're going to get anywhere with inspections.
Thanks. If anyone asks me, I'm going to send them to you.
I have a question though on that.
Yeah, what?
Who would provide the oversight?
Yeah, so I think the way that the bill is envisioned is that it would be a licensing requirement, just like the business licensing requirement. But as far as the inspections, I agree with Paul, it would probably fall to the local governments to do inspections. But again,
Right.
I don't know.
Right. And then what happens is it looks great on paper, but in reality, it's not being done. So there has to be a trigger, a mechanism.
Yeah,
Usually, go ahead, Judd.
The licensing issue, if it's connected to just a certain type of voucher, is a condition of accepting that voucher, I think is going to flop. I think the issue of landlord licensing needs to be a thing unto itself. In Georgetown, for example, there's a one-time requirement when you submit you have a rental property. In the very beginning, you're supposed to have a license, but it's not an annual license. It's just like a license as long as you pay the fee.
Right.
And any inspections after that first inspection is complaint driven. There's no requirement to have an annual inspection. The problem is, in a complaint driven situation, usually the tenants are desperately trying to hang on to housing, and they're not going to raise an issue that's likely to have a retaliation from the landlord, or the landlord says, well, I can't make those repairs, you're going to have to move out. And then in the county, there is no requirement at all for licensing. So we have a lot of rental housing out there we know very little about. So at any rate, I do agree though that I don't think you can tie it as a condition of accepting a voucher, and because that creates a special class of licensing that other landlords that don't want to take those vouchers don't have to comply with.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting that there would be special licensing for people who take vouchers. I was saying that the inspection piece of taking a voucher is a big barrier or a big point of contention for many landlords, right? That they don't want to go through the inspection process in order to have someone have a voucher used as rental assistance. But yeah, I don't think there would be there's not going to be a separate licensing procedure for those landlords. So any questions about source of income? Because I feel like that's our hot, already filed, in process, we need to push her through kind of bill that's going on right now.
I have a question about income. So currently with like the SRAP vouchers and FUP vouchers and things that are out there, they're requiring all income be reported. So our youth, all foster care base, receive a stipend, which fluctuates based on their level of productivity. And now that is being required as part of us submitting income. And that's actually throwing off what our youth are able to afford based on their need because it can fluctuate every month. So that's something that we're, hopeful that we can get. I don't know if we can get it thrown out or if it shouldn't count because it's not consistent earned income in regards to like a paycheck or something.
Sure. John Whitelaw, you might have something to add here. My experience with clients that have had fluctuating income is that is an advocacy point for sure when you're qualifying for a voucher. And there are certain calculations that you can ask be done to make sure that you're not, given an income higher than your real income. John, do you have something to add?
Not explicitly, but if anyone is being denied participation in the program because they've been told they have too much income, or if the agency is telling them that their rent is being increased because of extra income, and this is a fluctuating income issue, they absolutely should be getting in touch with us. We are willing and able to do that sort of case for voucher and project-based recipients who get increases in their share of payment, which are incorrect, and we can work with folks on those issues. The agency doesn't always get it wrong, but sometimes they do.
And generally, this is Khadija. If it's a HUD-funded program, you're not even allowed to count a stipend as income, because when we do our HUD-funded programs here, we're not allowed to count them. It has to be an earned income or like a SSDI or SSI. You can't count a stipend as income. Not for any HUD-funded program.
And so that's a separate issue, which I agree with. Income is a technical term for all of these programs. And while certainly recipients would not be expected to know those rules, we do. I'll just give you one example. My understanding is, and Sarah mentioned this earlier, the child credits that are going to become available this summer, my recollection is those are not included as income for any program at all. So folks the same, so they are income in the practical sense to folks and very important, but don't count as income in terms of benefits. And so those are the sorts of rules that are very important for advocates to be able to not play with, but to look at to see if the agency is making an error. And and when I said they make mistakes, everybody, we all make mistakes. Stuff happens, right? This is not the agency's intending to get it wrong, but sometimes they do, and that's why we're here to be able to assist folks who get caught on the wrong side of that.
So Stacy, it sounds like there might be some solutions. Sounds like you should contact John at Classy. If you need any contact information or want to follow up with me, feel free to do so, and I can make sure you're put in touch with the right people. I don't want to gloss over the comment about the importance of home ownership. This triggers for me a couple of really big things that have been bubbling up for me. So I'm going to talk for 30 seconds and I'd love to have feedback. So kind of two answers to the home ownership question. One is that the infrastructure bill actually provides a good deal of money for creation of single family homes, which is really exciting. Again, it would kind of be your Habitat for Humanity type single family homes that remain affordable. So there is some recognition from the federal government and also state government, and we can talk about like the state funds for developing housing, that housing does need to be developed and that, home ownership is really important. I think the flip side of this is my concern about foreclosures. This has been a really big point of advocacy for me when I'm meeting with the federal delegation or state legislators, that we have a lot of money coming for rental assistance programs, which is important. I'm not saying it shouldn't be coming for rental assistance. We need to keep people stably housed. However, what we know is that this has been the longest period of forbearance ever. So there are people who have been in forbearance for a year. We know that mortgage companies may ask for very large payments when forbearance ends. And when I say large, I mean very large, money that just isn't available. It just isn't. There's some mortgage assistance coming, but I don't think to the scale that we need it to. It's a puzzle I have not personally solved. I would love to hear if anyone has suggestions on kind of what advocacy we could be doing to prepare for what I see in the next year as a really big issue in Delaware, that there's this group of people that are going to owe a lot of mortgage money that are probably COVID affected. And in other words, they've lost income or have lost jobs. And what can we be advocating for to support those people? Paul, you look like you want to jump in. Do you want to jump in?
Well, I can't turn back time, right? But we went through this in the last crisis, and I don't think this forbearance was a great idea for this long, because as I've said earlier, it just keeps accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. And we're dealing also with some folks who COVID was not the reason they stopped paying. They stopped paying because they heard about the forbearance, whether it's forbearance in their mortgages or the rent assistance. I really think that the best we could probably get on this is to move the debt to on the backside of the loan. And so by that, I mean, the majority of this huge debt, which, if you think it's $1,000 a month and it's 12,000 now, and somebody at 50% of median who's never going to be able to pay that off in a lump sum, that the opportunity for the loan to be extended for 18 months with no penalty, I think is the best solution.
Oh, I want to agree with Paul, because FHA made it mandatory for them to add that at the end of the loan. So if we were going to advocate for anything, it'd be for legislation on all loans, any kind of mortgage. If there's past due payments and current income being like, if they have income, that they can add it onto the end. But there are a lot of people who are holding on to homes knowing that they won't be able to pay for it, or holding on to homes that are too expensive for them to live in. So, and that's another crisis, that there's housing issues everywhere. There's a large amount of there's a large population, right? So our population isn't getting smaller, and at some point it's just resources. When do the resources end? So how do we find creative ways to just house our growing population in general? But for mortgages, the only way I could see getting people to have to make those lump sums so that it's not a huge problem like it was during the bubble is to add it on like FHA requires. All of their loans, servicers required that during the moratorium that they add it onto the end if they applied for that, Paul.
So I just want to add to this. This is really important, and I don't know that we can get anywhere with it. For those banks that did foreclose, what they were doing is not taking title. They foreclosed on the properties, and the past owners who no longer owned the property were still responsible to the municipalities for taxes and other things, that even though, because the big banks did not take title to the property, so they remained vacant, and a lot of at least fines were going to the previous owner because the banks did not take title. And so if they're going to foreclose, I want them to take title to the property.
They got to take title.
But they didn't in the last bubble.
And that's different by state. And I actually don't know if Delaware requires them to take, I think Delaware requires them to take title if they foreclose. So if you foreclose, you're taking whatever property in exchange for the money that's owed. And I'm pretty sure that's required in Delaware, but I'd have to look into it. I don't exactly remember. But I think it's required here, and it's different in different states. So we can't change everywhere, but we can definitely try to push through what happens in Delaware.
John, do you remember?
You're right. Because I bought a foreclosure, and when I bought it from the bank had everything. So I think Delaware does require that. They take title of the property. And I know I had a friend that bought a foreclosure, and that bank had title of everything. So I think in Delaware they do require it, that the bank has to take full title.
Yeah, places like some parts of Pennsylvania and New York State, I know they allow the state to go into foreclosure for taxes first. The state wants to get paid first, usually, but here the lender can actually get paid first, and then the state gets paid any taxes. The county and the state can get paid any taxes due. So
it seems like this is an issue, not to kick it, we can keep talking, but I think this is an issue we should make sure that your policy committee continues to address, because I do think this loss of home ownership, it's a loss of generational wealth, it's loss of housing stability. It's a really big issue, and it's like Sarah and Paul stated, I think it's coming. Might already be at our doorstep. And we, again, do have this, $354 million of rental assistance coming. We don't have that same volume of mortgage assistance. And I saw Devin, do you have anything to add from the DSHA standpoint on kind of mortgage assistance and what you think might be coming? I know you might not be able to speak to it.
Yeah, not personally. That's really more in housing finances wheelhouse. I know that we still have DMAP, but I'm not sure how much money has gone into DMAP lately. I know we got CARES Act funding to support it, but I don't know about the new bill or the new funding support. As you know, most of the big chunk of it is going towards DHAP, towards rental assistance, but I'm not as familiar with the mortgage assistance, unfortunately. I
No
can
problem.
circle back with the group.
Yeah, sorry to put you on the spot. Just thought there might be some good news about DMAP bringing us millions of dollars.
I mean, they can surprise you, but I just don't know.
Yeah. We also had in the chat someone bring up that there is the same concern for maintaining housing for people who are moved into housing from hotels with federal money that is going to expire. This theme of people are in housing that they can't maintain has been something that has come up in a lot of meetings that I've been in. So any discussion, any guidance you could give me on kind of where you think money needs to be funneled, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to have discussion about it. I think it's a big issue.
Can we talk realistically about money and people not being able to afford where they're placed?
Yeah.
To me, I deal a lot with rapid rehousing. I think it's absolutely ludicrous to give someone money to get a place to live and they don't have a job. You're setting them up for failure, because yes, I'm all for everyone being housed, but in the state of Delaware, we have so many systemic issues. We do not have proper placement for individuals. We do not have appropriate housing for individuals. And we want to throw rental assistance and rapid rehousing money at the situation instead of sitting down and getting everybody at the table and be very, very realistic about what is needed. This state was built on division, people not having access to being able to live or purchase or be where they wanted to be. And it's not addressed. It's glossed over. Let's throw money so we can continue to keep people housed. But these are not long-term or effective, because I work in a shelter. They get rapid rehousing money every year. It's cyclical. After they stop paying, they get put out. They spend another year hopping from place to place, qualify for rapid rehousing again, and now that's another pot of money. So until we are honest about what the real problem is and what the real issues are and address them from the foundation and kill the root, we are going to continue to look for ways and strategies to house people, to get people stabilized. We close down our mental health system. We have people walking the street unmedicated, unable to just do their ADLs, their daily living tasks, with no proper assistance, nobody to assist them in what they need to do. And you want to throw money in them, put them in a home by themselves and tell them, we're going to give you all of these wraparound supports, but then we're not going to mandate or make you participate in them. So how do you expect them to survive? How do you expect them to get to another level? We all sit here and talk, and it's wonderful. We have great meetings, but at the end of the day, the city of Wilmington, the city of Dover, and Lower Delaware, they all look the same. They're building high-end houses down at the end of Delaware. Dover is overrun with poverty, and Wilmington is overrun with poverty. So what do we do for the state? The state is not that big. We've got 1 million people, less than, in the state, and we still have the biggest housing issues and problems. And we've got all of us, this wonderful group, talking, and we've got this money coming that's not earmarked for any one particular thing. When do we go to Dover and say, own the history of this state, and let's do something about it to correct it? My question.
So I can't speak to most of that. I hear you. I think I was unclear. A lot of the money is earmarked. It's just not clear. We don't have guidance on exactly how it's coming, where it's going, what it can be used for. We need all that Treasury guidance. So I will follow up. I can follow up with you on kind of what the earmarks say and how we can use all of this money that's coming. And maybe we can work with you and with the COC to make sure that money is going where we think it needs to. Paul, you look like you have your hand up.
I could go on this forever, and I apologize. And Aaron, I appreciate all your comments, but I'm a progressive liberal. I think people have labeled me that, but we're part of the problem as well. You know, in permanent supportive housing, you know, we can't require anyone to do anything. Here's your housing. There are no requirements. And that has not always been, you know, it's well intended, but it's not always been the best. So, you know, you can't require, even when I'm working with foster care kids or kids aging out of foster care, once I give them the housing, my staff have to work really, 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 really hard to say, hey, we've got jobs available, we got education free available. With some of our young people, they just are not interested. So, you know, we're part of the problem. And when we closed down institutions and said, we're going to put supportive wraparound services, that project failed. And I do not want to build all new institutions, but we don't have a system that can provide solid wraparound services to keep people who have addictions and mental health issues housed long-term. It's a problem, and we need to come up with a new solution for it. And I'm done.
Thanks, Paul. So there have been some really good notes in the chat about living wage, about permanent housing solutions, permanent voucher assistance. I think we can all on this call agree that short-term or time-limited housing voucher assistance is often not the solution that many people need. They need longer-term assistance. So I think that there's been a lot of really good suggestions about how money should be used. Mimi, I'm going to call you out, but you messaged me directly. I think it's a great idea. She suggested that we probably need to follow up at some point to talk about all this federal money and kind of when we know more, how we can do some more advocacy around its use. And again, I think, yeah, I think a lot of the advocacy is going to need to be education on a very local level. If your local municipalities are getting this money, they're going to have a lot of people coming to them with hands out, and so even starting now to reach out to your local city council or government is to start flagging issues for them is really helpful.
I would suggest doing it before whatever that housing lobbying day is. So prep us all for that, plus give us the tools a couple of weeks in advance, maybe to start pushing at the local level.
Absolutely. Paulette?
When we talk about education and housing, one population that I work with, I work in reentry, and those coming out of prison face two different phases of homelessness. The first phase is they're coming out at the gate and they have no place to go. And they are in competition with whatever monies that are provided. It's usually a big secret as to where we can even find vouchers to put them in hotels temporarily. But otherwise, they're in competition with the families and the single moms with children. And I do understand those needs, but they wind up being way down at the bottom. Those that come out of prison and have a sister that hasn't seen them for 10 years and she wants to reunite with her brother. So he goes and stays with her, and 6 weeks later it falls apart. And you have that second wave of homelessness. Those are the educational pieces, because previously incarcerated make up a great deal of homelessness, but they go undetected. And I think that in terms of education and in terms of special programming, that's a population that we really do need to focus on. That's my 2 cents for the day.
Paulette, no objection here.
Okay.
Paulette, this is Erin. Sorry, my video is off. My dog is being a crazy person. We are working on issues around this in both our membership and nominations committee and the system performance committee, just around engaging sectors such as DOC for reentry and how to start getting data and coordinate services and stuff. So if I would invite you to join both of those committees, because I think your like expertise and experience in that area would be really helpful for both of those to inform the conversations.
What were the committees again?
The membership and nominations committee, as well as the system performance committee.
Okay.
And I can follow up with you after to send you that information.
Sure, thank you.
Paulette, I just had a gentleman yesterday that was just released an hour prior because our offices are directly down from Sussex County DOC. And same thing, he had called 211, nowhere to go. Maggie didn't have anything at Crisis House. And he said, thank you so much. And I gave him the resources I could give him. The van was trying to take him around. And I get this very, very often because we are in walking distance. So I would be, happy to be part of the conversation because they do see Catholic Charities banner and they do come here. So we try to help them the best we can. We are the first stop along their way of walking so that they don't have to walk along the highway. You're on mute, Paulette.
Give us a call. We'll exchange emails because we do have relationships with those transitional housing, but I don't remember, I think it was Paul that said, in terms of some of the regulations or restrictions that they put on them, they are still putting on some of the sober living houses that they must go to their counseling. And if they don't get to their counseling, then they're thrown out.
Exactly.
Right. And if the outcome was a therapeutic setting, what does it matter whether it's at that particular therapeutic setting? I have a gentleman who's working full time, going to school full time, and because he can't make the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday allotted time, he's in danger of being thrown out of his housing. And so like those kinds of nuances are still taking place with respect to reentry, because this is a population. Are they going to go and complain? No.
No.
They're not going to go to any kind of lawyer or court system because they're afraid that they're going to violate and be brought back in. So
Correct.
they are extremely vulnerable.
Correct.
So Erin, sorry, it sounds like we're sending a lot of work to your subcommittees, but it seems like we've flagged a couple things in this discussion. So one thing being foreclosure prevention, assistance, advocacy. One thing being specific populations. And then kind of this overarching idea of, and I know you already deal with this often, but you know, a way of being more comprehensive in our housing options and providing more support for folks as they're trying to maintain stable housing. It sounds like there's a lot more robust discussion to happen around those things. I also hear that we want to get more information about federal monies and how we can understand and direct them. Anything that I'm missing from everyone that's remained on the call that you feel like the COC needs to focus on quickly? Mimi?
Quickly, any sense other than SB, whatever it was, 90, on the Senate Housing Committee's priorities for the next few months? Anything they want to try to get on the docket?
Yeah, so I don't want to take, it's John here, sir. I don't want to take the thunder from Classy. I think the really big thing that's coming is the right to counsel bill. So that would
That's
be
great. That's
that
great.
would be the big thing.
I'm happy to say like 30 seconds on that. So we're not talking about it. Since there isn't a bill yet. I will give you a 2-minute update on what is happening. I'm not going to say a word about Delaware for the next minute. I'm going to just sort of talk to you very briefly about the national landscape. There's been a housing and an eviction crisis throughout the country for years, and it has not got national attention. It has started to get some local attention, particularly in big cities such as New York, where they enacted a right to counsel bill, Philadelphia, San Francisco, some in Cleveland. But the problems with these bills were twofold. One, they were very local, as in cities, and two, many of them were not rights to counsel in the traditional sense that they were. They all had funding limits. It was not, you have a right to counsel and we'll figure out how to do it. It's, we are allocating a certain amount of money to provide lawyers for tenants, which was great because it was none before, but was not comprehensive. That changed because of the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, a huge amount of attention was paid to the horror of people being evicted and being made homeless in the middle of a pandemic. Not that it's not terrible otherwise, but and in a terrible way, this then became an opportunity for housing advocates to talk about right to counsel in a broader context. And 2 states have now passed a statewide right to counsel, which is just waiting the governor's signature. Maryland, our neighbor, right next door, passed a right to counsel bill. I can't remember who it was, sometime earlier this month, and it is waiting the governor's signature. There is a bill pending signature or close to pending signature in the state of Washington. There's a bill in Nebraska, of all places, which, let's remember, our 6th grade civics. There's only 1 house in Nebraska. It's the only state with a unicameral legislature. So we're only going to get to 1 house in Nebraska. There is a more limited bill pending in Minnesota. And so this is a time where right to counsel has come to the fore. And those of us who work on the tenant side see this as a game changer. So just keep your eyes out for the news. I really don't want to say anything else about it yet. I know I'm being cagey, but I have to be. So there's not a whole lot more I can say at all.
Thanks for the update, John.
I
Deborah
think
might
April
be
29th.
equally.
Yeah.
I think look for the news a week today. No, a week tomorrow. Wrong day. A week tomorrow, April 29th.
It's okay. We're in COVID.
Good.
Everything's a blur.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I understand how you're feeling as you look at these different bills and what's happening.
But it would, I will say, it would be a game changer. I mean that not in the play sense, but for tenants to have counsel in evictions would be a major change in how the system works. And those of us on the tenant side obviously think it would be a major improvement. It would change the eviction universe for tenants to have lawyers. It just would, and I don't think anyone's.
Listen, I'm here to agree with that because I was evicted and with no counsel, and I think if I had counsel, things would have been much different. I know that.
So I want to say, Deborah, I reached out for information about the Homeless Bill of Rights and hit a bit of a wall. So you might be in a similar position for giving an update, but if you can give us any update about the Homeless Bill of Rights, that would be great.
The only thing I can tell you is that we had a meeting with the legislators who are sponsoring it maybe about 3 weeks ago, and with the reporting component, which would be the Delaware Human Relations Commission. And we're running into, should there be a reporting component? If the bill passed as we're drafting it, Delaware would be the only state that has passed a homeless bill of rights that would have a reporting component, which means that it empowers people who are experiencing homelessness to have a place to go to tell their story and to get help and addressing the issue of discrimination when they are looking for employment, housing, and services. One piece that came up during that discussion was that looking at having people identified as homeless become a protected class in Delaware. And so that's where we are now, having discussion about protective class, reporting component, or both. And so, we're just, going back and forth with that, and also looking at the language of the bill so that it will be more acceptable to our legislators as we push through with this. It's going to happen. I just hope it happens in my lifetime. That's all I say.
Oh, thank you.
Hope it happens in my lifetime.
Isn't that kind of the perfect legislative update? Let's hope it happens.
Because it really is a privilege when you think about we're coming at it from privileged positions, well, who would not want people who are experiencing homelessness to be protected? But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Thank you, Deborah. So we are at less than 10 minutes until we all disappear. We have covered a lot in the last hour and 20 minutes. Does anyone have kind of anything that we didn't touch on that they want to make sure that the group kind of hears about, or that we want to make sure that we pass on to a COC committee?
Sarah, there was a lot of conversation in the chat box about case management, and I know services are always voluntary. We recognize that, and this doesn't really get to like the need for permanent housing or permanent supportive housing, but there is some money for housing stabilization services, right? Like, do you want to talk about that a little bit, or how that might play out in Delaware?
If you can, that'd be great.
I actually don't know.
Oh.
But that's part of the pocket of money, right, that we're receiving in the new relief package is housing stabilization services.
Yes.
So, but we just need to come up with a plan for how to implement that still, like pending details, pending guidance, just like everything else. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need a pending guidance discussion, like we talked about earlier, that we need to follow up fairly quickly, probably as a COC with kind of, because like I said earlier, what's exciting, right, is the deadline for applying for all of the federal money is this weekend, which means that there will be guidance in the next couple of weeks coming on kind of what money is coming everywhere, and hopefully the Treasury guidance will come out in the next, they only have 30 days to issue it, so it should be coming really quickly for us to get more information about what all of this money is and can be used for and should be used for, and kind of the perimeters around it. Yeah, Mimi?
So just thinking perhaps target date for our, I can't think of the right word for it, but a legislative update specifically related to that, APRA, ARPA, whatever the initials are, maybe the first week in May. If that's not too soon, that seems like a good target for it. I'd hate for us not to be able to be out in front trying to influence how some of the money is used.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that would be helpful.
I'll work with Erin and Felicia on setting up a follow-up.
Yeah, I'm assuming the guidance comes as you're talking about, otherwise it's pointless, right?
Yeah, the fun part of all of these pots of money is that there's all this guidance that we have to read, and it's
Figure
like
out what it
following
means.
a maze. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully we'll get Treasury guidance on everything.
That would be wonderful.
The new emergency vouchers for survivors of domestic violence and people experiencing homelessness, like we're thrilled, we're very excited about that. But again, until we kind of have more parameters, we don't even know how many we're going to get, So until we
Really?
have more information, yeah, and can kind of really like move that conversation forward. But we're excited. We're anxiously awaiting further information.
I guess that's the question. If Delaware is applying by this weekend, when will we know what we're getting? What's the timeline for the release of that information? Anybody know yet? I should know, but I don't.
So I'm playing telephone a little bit. So what I understand is that this weekend, everyone who can apply, should apply, must apply. The formula has already been made, kind of right, based on what the assumption
right.
is of who's going to apply.
Yes.
It is possible that more money could come to Delaware if, say, just to randomly pick a state, Nebraska just fails to get in their application, that money will be allocated to other states. So, that money could fluctuate a little bit. I think the money is, we kind of know,
Yes.
but we don't know all the pots of money, and like the vouchers, we know that there are going to be new vouchers, but we don't know how many Delaware is going to get, because no one has figured that one out yet. No one's done the math.
Yes, gotcha.
So yeah, I think it's quickly we should know, but I don't, when you're talking about federal money, I don't know what quickly means sometimes.
I say May 15th. We'll know
There you
everything May
go.
15th. Might as well pick a day.
So
Thank you, guys.
we have a lot of follow-up to do, but we only have a couple minutes. And again, I was warned at the beginning that I cannot keep you over. It is not a class that can go over. So if you have anything that didn't get answered, if you put things in the chat that I missed, if you feel like you want to have a follow-up discussion with me or with Erin or Felicia or anyone from the COC, please feel free to email me or Erin or Felicia or anyone from the COC, and I'm happy to facilitate any connections if people are confused about who said what or what we can do to follow up. Please feel free to email me. But thank you for the amazing discussion. It was a really wonderful and robust discussion, and I think I learned more than I taught you. So that's always the way it should be. Thank you.